So we'd like to get everyone's attention, and thank you very much for coming. If we could get everyone to get settled in, and we are going to begin. My name is Tara Lennox-Zepp, and I'm the Prince Albert City Councillor for beautiful Ward 2. And I'm thank you. And I'm very happy to be here today. I want to welcome you to the Prince Albert NDP Leadership debate between candidates of the leadership of the Saskatchewan New Democratic Party. As we gather here today, we acknowledge that we gather in the territory of Treaty 6 and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We pay respect to the ancestors of our gathering place and affirm our relationships with one another. Now, I also have to mention that this is the first of these leadership debates where we get to be seated, especially in comfortable armchairs. Candidates, you can thank me later. The next leader of the Saskatchewan NDP will be chosen at a convention on March 3rd, 2018. You can find out more information about the convention and purchase your tickets online at www.saskndp.ca. For tonight's debate, we are going to split things into two parts with a 10-minute break in between. For the first half of the debate, we will have opening statements, followed by questions submitted by the media, and we are going to let the candidates each ask one question of another. For the second half, we are inviting you, the audience, to submit questions to be asked. You can submit your questions by email at info@saskndp.ca or on Twitter by tweeting @Sask_NDP. You have until the end of the first half of the debate to submit your questions. And following the audience questions, we will finish with closing statements from the candidates. In addition, for this debate, we have provided the candidates with an additional answer card. If I could have the candidates maybe just show us their card. That's what it looks like. And both candidates will have the option to use the card to receive an additional 60 seconds after the opposing candidate's response to respond for an additional 60 seconds. Candidates have the option to do this up to twice during the debate. Any candidate whose answer puts me into early labor will also receive extra points.
At least I'm here.
In some debates, people are asked to hold their applause, but not tonight. We want you to enjoy the night and learn something. Please feel free to applaud candidates and their responses. Now I am pleased to introduce our debaters, two candidates for the leadership of the NDP. The MLA for Saskatoon-Meewasin and candidate for the leadership of the Saskatchewan NDP, welcome Ryan Meili. And MLA for Regina Rosemont and candidate for leadership of the Saskatchewan NDP, welcome Trent Wotherspoon. I would also like to take this time to introduce elected officials in the room. If Doyle Vermette could please stand up. Doyle Vermette, MLA for Cumberland. And if Nicole Rancourt could please stand up. Hometown favorite, MLA for PA Northcote. I don't think anyone else snuck in on me. Any other elected? No? Okay. Oh, do we have a Reeve that? Reeve Don Firk? Could we ask Reeve Don Firk to stand, please? Thank you. We are going to start with opening statements. Both candidates have 3 minutes. And Ryan Meili, you are up first. Go ahead with your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Ryan Meili, and I'm running to be leader of the NDP and the next premier of Saskatchewan. And, you know, this is a pretty different format to be up here in these comfortable chairs. Feels a little like story time. You might have seen Abraham running around. This would be about story time at our house. And I've been thinking a lot about stories lately. Because there's a story that we've been told for many years, that we can't expect better, that there is no alternative. A story that we have to just get used to kids going to school hungry. We have to get used to the idea that people will live in poverty even though they're working full time. That we can't afford a provincial bus service, that we can't expect a fair share from the sale of our natural resources, that small towns will just continue to see their population fall and their services disappear, that it's normal for people to be forced to choose between paying the rent and paying for the medications they need to stay healthy. Well, I'm sick of this story. How about you? It's a pretty lousy story. You know, the plot is weak, the character development is thin, and there's no happy ending. And worst of all, and above all, it's not true. We are not stuck. There is an alternative. We live in a province of tremendous abundance, and we have proven in far tougher times than these that we can make life fairer and more affordable. We can expand and improve Medicare, including introducing universal pharmacare. We can reconnect rural and urban Saskatchewan in our conversations and by bus. We can, as we are here today on Treaty 6 territory, homeland of the Métis, we can model real reconciliation, closing the gap in economic, health, and educational outcomes. We can lead in the transition to the energy infrastructure of the 21st century with new jobs and a stable economy. We can care for each other as we age, and we can invest in the best future for our children. To do so, we need the courage to reject that tired, internalize that old narrative of helplessness, and instead have the courage to write a new story of agency, of possibility, of leadership. This is our moment to do exactly that. This is our time. Let's write that story together. I look forward to your questions, our discussion tonight, and to the work ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Now, Trent, your opening statement.
Thank you so much, Tara. It's a little different in these chairs. It'll take us a bit to get into the groove, but I'm thrilled to be here tonight on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional homeland of the Métis, here in the gateway to the north, Prince Albert, as we build to win in 2020. I'm honored to be here as well with my colleagues, Doyle Vermette and Nicole Rancourt. I'm so thankful to have their support as well on this in this leadership process, and so thankful for the work of all of us as we work to build in the months and years ahead. The fact of the matter is the stakes really couldn't be higher for the people of our province. There's so much at risk. That's why I'm so motivated to lead the fight and to serve as the next Premier of Saskatchewan. I want to work to build a province that works for everyone, one that's filled with hope, opportunity, and reconciliation. That's the Saskatchewan that I want to build, and it's the Saskatchewan that we deserve. You know, it's become clear to me that the Sask Party doesn't just have a deficit of dollars. They have a deficit of decency. And at the end, it's that deficit that stirs me the most. I was an educator before serving as an MLA. And, you know, I worked with young people facing some of the harshest realities. From those young people, I learned the most. And I also am motivated from that experience, witnessing tremendous resilience and strength, and am motivated to deliver change. And I know there's many within this province that recognize the needs within our community and the many educators that are here as well. The province that I want to build would include a vision of universal $15 a day childcare. It's good for families and good for the economy. It'd be universal mental health and addictions services. Far too many people are suffering in silence, far too many without the supports that they deserve. My vision would include locking down our crown corporations with the highest level of protection possible, and then strengthening and expanding them for future generations. My vision would mean acting meaningfully on reconciliation, addressing poverty, not just fighting for, but delivering a $15 minimum wage, and having real action on climate change that works for our province. Very importantly, we need to stop the Sask Party's push to take our province in the direction of becoming a precarious, part-time, low-wage, privatized, outsourced economy. We need to build a strong and inclusive economy that works for all. So New Democrats, my message to you is let's work together. And let's remember that as we work to stop the damage, as we work to defeat the Sask Party as we must, let's remember what we're fighting for. We're working to build a province that works for everyone, one filled with hope, opportunity, and reconciliation. Let's do this work together, and together, let's get the job done.
Thank you, Trent. For the first half of this debate, we invited members of the media to submit questions. For the first question, Trent, you will have 90 seconds to respond, followed by Ryan. The first question was submitted by the newsroom at the Prince Albert Daily Herald. The question is, now that the Saskatchewan Party's leadership race is over, the party has begun shifting to resume attacking the NDP as the party that will bankrupt and ruin the province. In your mind, what does the Saskatchewan NDP have to do to move from being seen as critics of the Saskatchewan Party to being seen as a viable alternative for undecided voters in 2020?
Thank you, and it's a good question, and it's an important one. Certainly, the party that I know and love as New Democrats is one with a strong history of fiscal responsibility, of sustainability, of planning for generations. And that's an approach that we need to take on. And we certainly aren't going to take any lessons from the Sask Party. This is a government that failed to save a dime during the best days. Drained the rainy day fund when the barrel of oil was over $100 a barrel, and it left Saskatchewan people vulnerable, all while signing taxpayers onto deal after deal that wasted dollar after dollar, trying, I think, to tie the hands of future generations, of future governments. So it's important at this point in time that we not let that happen. It's important that we make the smart investments that we need to into areas like childcare, into areas like education. And I'll give you an example around mental health and addictions, and I'm fighting for a universal mental health and addictions system within our province. Each dollar in will save $7 from the healthcare system, greater health, the healthcare costs. Of course, it also saves lives, but also creates greater productivity. So we need to make those kind of smart investments for all the right reasons, but we also need an accountability commission. We need to have an additional bracket for those earning over $250,000 a year to pay their fair share. And let's review, of course, our royalty structures to make sure that we properly capture windfall revenues for the people of the province.
Ryan?
Thank you.
Ryan, same question to you. In your mind, what does the Saskatchewan NDP have to do to move from being seen as critics of the Saskatchewan Party to being seen as a viable alternative for undecided voters in 2020?
Thank you for the question, and thanks to the Herald for the question and for sticking around. By the way, it was great to see the employees take over that operation, and that we still have the Prince Albert Herald to share local stories. It's really important. You know, last week the Sask Party decided that their answer to the questions that people had about the future of the province, the real concerns that people have after that last budget, after seeing the debt grow, that their answer was more of the same. And it's a bit, sorry for the obvious joke, but it's also a reality. They're taking the bet that people are satisfied, that they're okay with the current trajectory. And I don't think they are. And my experience as we're traveling around the province is that people are not happy, that the benefit of the doubt is gone for the Sask Party. Whether it's shutting down STC, whether it's the cuts to health and education, there are so many things that turn people off. But for us to be, people are looking for change, but for us to be the change they choose, we actually have to be talking about something more than just what's wrong with them. More of the same, they think it'll work for them. We know it won't work for us. The last 10 years, we have been struggling. And part of that struggle is that we've been focused mostly on knocking the Sask Party. And what we need to do, if we're going to win, we have to show that we have a vision, that we have a plan that's a credible alternative, a plan to win in rural Saskatchewan with real policies for rural Saskatchewan and agriculture, a plan to win in cities, a plan to win working with First Nations and Métis communities. If we don't show those positive ideas, if all we do is focus on what's wrong with the Sask party, then we'll have to continue to focus on what's wrong with the Sask party because we'll still be in opposition.
And we do thank the candidates for watching their time. Ryan, you will be answering first this time. Again, this question came from the newsroom at the Prince Albert Daily Herald as a follow-up to the first question. How do you fight the argument that NDP policies are bad for the province?
Well, absolutely talking about our history and when things have gone better is very clear that when NDP governments are in place, we actually do better. But I also think we need to talk about not just the past, but what the future is and what our plan is. And I think people are ready for a different kind of conversation and a different understanding of how we approach the big economic questions. How do we afford expanding and improving healthcare and including pharmacare? How do we afford early childhood development? How do we afford mental health? How do we afford having a provincial bus service? Well, we afford those things by actually being smart with our money, which isn't what we've seen from the Sask party. You know, the wasteful spending on things like the Regina bypass, et cetera, but also giving away the farm. You know, not charging corporations enough, despite the fact that they're benefiting enormously from our economy, not getting a fair share of our royalties and our non-renewable resources. If we're going to be able to afford the things that we need, and we can afford those things. We are tremendously wealthy, but we need to have a new attitude that says we're going to be smart about the social investments that we choose. We're going to be smart about making sure that all of the revenue that we should be getting is coming towards us. We're going to be smart about choosing the decisions that will make the biggest impact in people's lives, dealing with poverty, dealing with the injustices, and creating the conditions for economic success.
Trent, same question to you. How do you fight the argument that NDP policies are bad for the province?
Well, I think it's laying out our vision and our plan, and it's including Saskatchewan people within it. We know we have a real uphill battle that we have to prevail in building out that relationship, for example, in rural Saskatchewan. This is something critical to our party and to our province. It's something very important to me. Following this leadership process, I'm fully committed to a listening and building tour right across this province with our incredible team of MLAs and with our leaders and members within our party. This is critical for us to go out and talk about the challenges of today and the solutions for tomorrow. So it's important for us to lay out that vision that's responsible, that speaks to future generations, and it's important for us to take time with people, to do it in an earnest and honest way, be willing to take some time with some folks who might push us back, maybe even rightly on certain fronts, and be willing to accept some of that conversation. But I have a lot of faith in this province. The values we see from of the current government don't line up with the Saskatchewan that I know and love. Common sense, compassion, a community-minded approach is really what we're all about. And we need to lean on and trust in Saskatchewan people at this time. This is a government that's taking over power and control from people and local communities. We have to do the opposite. Let's lean on each other and let's lay out that vision and let's deliver that future that everyone deserves.
Trent, you are up first this time. The next question was submitted by 900 CKBI. A lot of people in northern Saskatchewan felt they were left out in the cold by the shutting down of STC. How would you address the transportation issues for people who travel from city to city or town to city for medical needs?
Well, I really appreciate the question, and and so many have been left out in the cold. Through the north, all through our province. And this represents a breaking of trust with Saskatchewan people. This was a premier and a government that promised that they wouldn't sell off, that they wouldn't privatize STC. Shortly after the election, of course, found out that that wasn't the truth. STC was a lifeline to the people of our province. It connected our rural, vast and remote and northern province. It connected people to healthcare, connected people at times where they needed safety and security. It connected families and people to economic opportunities and training. It connected our entire province. And it's something that's a public and vital service, which is why I have a full commitment to build back a public provincial transportation system that connects our entire province. And you have to remember again, it's not that the government's saving money here. They're paying the bill, they're paying for the freight, they're shipping blood still through, I guess, private couriers now. They're having patients with expensive taxi runs from rural Saskatchewan to Saskatoon, for example, so the dollars are there. This is a priority and it speaks about values. In Saskatoon, the system is subsidized to the tune of about $30 million. The fact that STC served all of Saskatchewan for $10 or $11 or $12 million represented exceptional value to the people of the province, and it's something that we need to build back to connect the north, connect the south, and all the points in between.
And Ryan, same question to you. How would you address the transportation issues for people who travel from city to city or town to city for medical needs?
I've met yesterday with a woman in Saskatoon who was from Meadow Lake and who's moved to Saskatoon now because she couldn't actually manage her life if she didn't have a way to get to the city. We've heard of professionals leaving L'Orange. There's people, older folks who are leaving smaller towns because they need to be closer to the services they need. We hear about businesses in PA who are so used to shipping their products around the north and aren't able to do so anymore. And of course, farmers losing days on the field because they can't get parts or because they're having to take an older loved one in for an appointment and aren't able to have somebody else manage the farm. And so they're losing days in the field. This is hurting everyone. And I think because of that, it's got legs. It's a story that we can actually continue to talk about, that this is not over. There's often a defeatist attitude that once it's gone, it's gone. And I don't think that's true. I think we can build it again. And it won't look the same. You know, if this hotel burnt down, God forbid, and certainly not tonight, but if this hotel burnt down, they probably wouldn't build the exact same Travelodge, right? They'd build something new. So what could we build that's new? How do we talk to the people around the province, find out what was working well, what was missing, where are the opportunities for it to be more financially successful? Can we have energy efficient vehicles? Can we have it integrate better with urban transit systems? I think there's so much we can do. Let's take this opportunity. They made a big mistake. They got rid of something we really need. Let's build something better.
Now, each of our candidates will have the opportunity to ask one question of each other. For these questions, the candidate asking the question has 60 seconds to ask. Then there is 90 seconds for response. The candidate asking the question receives 60 seconds for rebuttal, and the responder gets an additional 30 seconds to reply. Ryan, you are up. Go ahead and ask your question.
Trent, we've spent a bit of time together, so you know my story, but maybe not everybody else would know. I grew up on a farm from rural Saskatchewan, and we've been spending a lot of time in rural areas during this race. Our fortunes, however, have not been so great in rural Saskatchewan, especially in the last decade. Things have really been tough. We've got the impression out there that the NDP has lost touch with rural Saskatchewan. Something I did a few weeks ago was release a rural and agriculture policy that talked about how we can make it easier for people to succeed, those who are working and living on the farm, as well as make life better in small towns, whatever people's livelihood or age is. And we haven't yet seen a rural or ag policy from you. And I'm just wondering if maybe this is a moment where you could talk about what could we have done differently in the last decade to be more successful in rural Saskatchewan, and how do you think we turn things around to be really successful?
Sure, no, it's an important question. I certainly have a lot of rural and agriculture commitments, and it's critical for our party to build and be able to serve an entire province. It's far more than having the building that trust to serve an entire province. It's about delivering for an entire province. I mentioned just a little bit ago that we have a government that's really taken for granted rural Saskatchewan, or betrayed rural Saskatchewan, which is why it's so critical that we do things like build back a public provincial transportation system. It's also why it's so important that we act on things like comprehensive water management within this province that I've, of course, spoken to and as part of my vision as well, and stop the sell-off of our prairie grasslands and protect and reestablish wetlands within our province. And in fact, there's a great confluence here that some of our meaningful actions around climate change will also create important opportunities through rural Saskatchewan. Another example of that would be renewable power, distributed generation across our province, working with homeowners, but importantly farms and First Nations and smaller communities throughout our province. This is something that would be creating jobs and opportunity and would really connect rural Saskatchewan. We also have to recognize rural Saskatchewan cares deeply about quality of life and their viability, which is why the takeover of education and the cuts that are being pushed upon our school divisions are so damaging. It's important that we have classrooms that are the most enriched and engaging classrooms possible, and that's simply not possible under the current conditions of this government, which is why I've been committed to reaching out on this front. And very importantly, I've committed to reaching out, listening, and building all across rural Saskatchewan, villages, towns, First Nations. It's something that I've enjoyed. It's something that I value.
Thanks for that. And I think there's a lot we have in common and a lot we could discuss about the types of policies going forward that could really attract more support in rural Saskatchewan. A couple of other things that I think would be helpful. We have talked about, there was a meeting recently, I know there's a few folks who were there, of farm leaders and rural leaders in the province, really reinvigorating our Rural Issues Caucus. We also had the summer student program this last summer, which had people traveling around the province all summer, meeting with different communities. Maybe that's something that we could actually make a year-round kind of thing, like the Wheat Pool used to do with field agents. Have a few constituencies come together and support somebody who's doing that building work on the ground. But I guess the question that I started off with that maybe we didn't hit right on was, what do you think in the last 10 years we could have done differently to have been more successful? Is there anything that you sort of regret or that you would really want to see us change?
Yeah, I think there's a real, that we really need to spend the time and the effort and to focus on our entire province. And I don't know that the focus always included to the extent that it should have rural Saskatchewan. And so that's the listening, that's the building, that's the summer organizers that I was privileged to work with and work to establish along with our team. I see Sawyer Swan that's here tonight. I see Zach Nelson that's here tonight. I was pounding doors with Brittany Singer in Melfort here today with candidate Lauren Schroeder and Betty that are here today. So it's putting the resources and making sure that we focus on an entire province. And it also will allow us not just to build good policy, but it'll assist us from an electoral perspective. We need to earn back trust to serve in those rural seats, and it's about taking time with the people of this province, about laying forward a vision that meshes with theirs. That excites me. And I was out to the border of Alberta in Fox Valley, a town of 200, with education critic Carla Beck. We had over 200 people at that meeting for education. There's common ground for us to find out there, but we have to be willing to take the time and put the focus where it needs to be.
We've had both candidates that go a little bit over. I know there's a lot to say, but we're going to ask everyone to just be as cognizant as possible with the time. No problem. We are going to go back to a few more of the questions submitted by media, and then we'll give Trent a chance for his question. First, I want to remind you that for the second half of this debate, we are inviting you, the audience, to submit questions to be asked. That's info@saskndp.ca or on Twitter by tweeting at saskndp, Sask_NDP, that is. You have until the end of the first half of the debate to submit these questions. Trent, you will be answering first this time. This question was submitted by PA Now and CKBI Radio News. The Mayor of Prince Albert is promising tax reductions for business and has offered incentives for new business in the city. What would you do to inspire and encourage the business sector to invest more and create jobs?
Well, it's a good question, and it's an important one. I know this region has been hard hit by job loss this last year and for a period of time. And all of the cuts of the Sask party as well, in through education and through healthcare, and for the most vulnerable have real consequences on this front. So we need to stop the cuts. We need to invest the dollars where they count. I was chatting with some educators just before I came in here, and it's far more than putting the $30 million that Scott Moe's talking about, because that represents another cut to the school divisions, to our classrooms all across our province. We also have to create opportunity. We need to be acting on renewable power right now, working with homeowners, working with businesses, working with farms and First Nations. Same on the energy efficiency retrofit side. These are important. And then an important commitment certainly back to the mayor and to local leaders across our province is to support local economic development and entrepreneurs. This is something I have laid out a commitment to as well, and it's important to the people of the province. We're one of the only provinces that doesn't have local economic development that is funded and supported. And we do best when we have those within a region that know the assets supported. And when I think of this region right here, there's a lot of opportunities from value-add agriculture through to job creation on a lot of fronts, but it's important to stop the cuts, stop the sell-offs of our crowns, and then build that inclusive, strong economy.
And now, Ryan, same question to you. What would you do to inspire and encourage the business sector to invest more and create jobs?
There was a paper that came out a few months ago from the Chamber of Commerce, Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce, and they had the Construction Association and Mining Association, etc., all weighing in on this. And it was called, and this caught my attention because it was called the upstream economy. And they had gone around and had these conversations all around the province and asked people what would make a difference in improving their lives. And they came to the conclusion, which I thought was, not everything that was recommended in there did I agree with, but the vast majority were things like investing in early childhood, things like trying to eliminate poverty, recognizing that we lose nearly $4 billion a year to our economy because of poverty. And so when I hear this question and the preamble about should we really focus on tax cuts, I think that's not the best approach. You're making a choice there. You're saying we will either collect this money or we won't. We'll have it to invest or we won't. And I don't think it's the best choice for regular people. I also don't think it's the best choice for businesses. When you look at the data, if you cut corporate taxes, for example, for every dollar you cut corporate taxes, you get back 80 cents to your economy. So you're losing 20 cents on the dollar. For every dollar, if you take that same dollar and you put it into early childhood development or a housing program or employment training for people who have challenges getting into employment, comes back as $1.50 or $1.70, just in the economic growth side of the ledger, not to mention the savings, because the people you've helped are doing well instead of winding up in hospital, in the prison system, on social assistance. So I think there are things we can do to improve business and improve the economy, but we should really be thoughtful about making sure they also improve people's lives.
And Trent, your chance to respond. Oh, sorry. I guess we don't need to do that one twice. We're going to have Ryan up
My
first.
next answer is going to be better. I had more time to think here.
Thank you. Ryan, we're going to have you up first this time. And this question came from, as well, PA Now and CKBI Radio News. The Saskatchewan Party is very much against a federally imposed carbon tax, yet other provinces are making big strides towards addressing climate change and greenhouse gases. What would you do to ensure Saskatchewan can be a serious and credible leader in protecting the environment for our grandchildren?
Well, that's a great question from PA Now, and really well phrased, because it sounds like they really recognize that we're missing an opportunity here. Not only are we leaving lots of dollars on the table, there's already tens of millions of dollars that haven't come to Saskatchewan because we haven't been able to come to any agreement with the federal government. We're also missing an opportunity to show real leadership, say that we take climate change seriously, and that we're willing to make some wise decisions. So how would we go about it? I think the first thing to do is recognize that if we're going to have a carbon pricing system, and the federal government has told us we will, then we should design it ourselves and not have it imposed on us from Ottawa. We should come up with our own system. And now that's where it gets interesting. What are the details? How do we do that? And what are the principles that actually matter as you're designing that Made in Saskatchewan system? One, it actually has to work. It has to decrease emissions. Two, it has to be something that doesn't make life less affordable. In fact, that helps regular families continue to do well. And we've seen the model in Alberta where people get rebates. The majority of people in Alberta are actually making money off of their carbon levy system rather than paying more. We also need to make sure we're protecting agriculture, protecting trade-exposed industries, recognizing the way that agriculture contributes to addressing climate change through sequestration of carbon. And overall, just coming up with a system that will improve our economy, take advantage of this opportunity, this shift to show leadership rather than what we have for the last decade, which is dragging behind and unfortunately being an embarrassment instead of being a role model to our kids in the next generation.
And as much as I am happy that we have candidates who have a lot to say, a lot of content, that's a good thing for a leadership race, I'm going to ask you to be cognizant of the 10-second warning. Trent, your chance to respond. What would you do to ensure Saskatchewan can be a serious and credible leader in protecting the environment for our grandchildren?
It's a really important question, and it's one that needs to motivate all of us. It's the future that we leave to this next generation that we're going to be answering for within our lifetime. And we can't pretend that the Sask Party's approach on this is costing us real dollars. The billion plus that they blew on the carbon capture debacle for a measly 100 megawatts is the most expensive power possible, and we see that on our power bills. But just the same, we pay for drought, we pay for flooding, we pay for the damage that happens to communities, so we need to act. We need to build out a Saskatchewan climate change response to carbon pricing and a plan that works for Saskatchewan people. And for me, we certainly do need to make sure we protect consumers, families on this front. Of course, they're hit hard on front after front already by the Sask Party. We need to protect producers who play a very important role as stewards of the land and in sequestering carbon. We need to protect, have measures in place for trade-exposed industries, but we have a tremendous opportunity here as well that will also jumpstart our economy. We should be moving aggressively right now with renewable power generation all across our province, allowing homeowners, allowing farms, allowing First Nations, allowing public infrastructure to generate power, along with energy efficiency retrofits, creating jobs and reducing our emissions. And of course, we need to protect our wetlands and protect our grasslands in managing our water from a comprehensive perspective.
And I see Ryan is holding up his candidate card. Please go ahead.
Well, first of all, thanks for reminding us of the time, so I bought a little more. And I think that's the point that we really need to come to on this one, is that this is not something that's scary. And we've been told that we have to fear this idea, that we have to fear any real action on climate change. And the reality is this is an enormous opportunity for us. There are good jobs long-standing jobs that will last. There are opportunities to have production of renewable energy throughout this province. I'd really like to see us go down the road of something like, many of the folks in the room will remember, the Family Farm Improvement Branch existed once upon a time, helped people get sewer and water on the farm. Well, what if we had a similar model where we would have one of our crown corporations coming around, talking to small communities, talking to farms, and saying, here's what's available, here's how you could do solar, here's how you could do wind, and here's how you can access that equipment at cost. And then we build into that system a way for people to sell back the extra power that they produce. So it's a chance to move to renewable energy, decrease our carbon emissions, and create opportunities for revenue and economic activity in small communities around the province.
And I see Trent is also calling in his candidate card. Please go ahead.
It's a very important space for us here, and such a good discussion that we're having here. Recently I had the chance to go out with one of the original leaders of the Saskatchewan Conservation House, and this was a house that was built under Ellen Blakeney with some support, and it was built in Northwest Regina, not far from me. And I grew up actually knowing the house. My dad would sort of tell me about it, but it sat there just simply, lived in by a family for many years. But it was world-class innovation that they had laid out at that point, but had sort of not really been acted on for years. And now it's picked up by the United Nations. He's recently won, the whole team has won recognition on this front from the United Nations, and it's been the foundation for some of the energy efficiency retrofits around the world and in places like Germany. So we really can do something on this front that's really practical, that creates jobs and reduces emissions. There are tremendous opportunities that are being missed right now by the inaction and sort of head in the sand approach of Moe and company. So this is a great space for us to lead.
Now for another candidate question. This time Trent will be asking the question. Please go ahead.
So we need to build and have a relationship with members, with grassroots, with Indigenous communities and leaders, movements, social movements and labor. We also need to have a relationship with rural Saskatchewan and with sort of other stakeholders economically. And I know through this leadership, we've had the invitation to participate with different groups out there, big groups like SARM, for example, hundreds of councillors across our province, or APAS, the Agricultural Producers of Saskatchewan, or the Stock Growers, or the Heavy Construction Association, or the Mining Association. I believe for us to succeed in this next election, as we must, we need to have relationships as well with groups like these, particularly to build those relationships in rural Saskatchewan as well. I've participated in those forums, enjoyed them, in those groups and gatherings. I just noted that you didn't participate in that, and it's very important for us to do so. I guess my question is, do you see that as a bit of a mistake through this period of time?
Yeah, you asked me this question in Regina, and I had some more time to think about it afterwards, and I thought it was kind of a strange question, because, well, I'd like to maybe pull out my calendar and we can compare, and it's been pretty full. I think I've put 50,000 kilometers on the vehicle in the last year, just being around, meeting with business groups, with community groups, with so many different folks. The fact that you made some choices to go to some different things than I did, I think that's a little bit odd, and I almost wonder what it is you're sort of driving at there, what exactly you're trying to suggest. But the reality is, we need to be meeting with all kinds of folks, and that's exactly what I've been doing. I don't know that it would make a huge difference. Well, I think if you looked at my calendar, we would find, oh, Trent didn't go to this, Trent didn't go to that, because that's just, we have to make choices in this. For example, I was talking to the folks from Climate Justice Saskatchewan, and we responded to their questionnaire, your team chose not to. We all make these choices, and they said no. So we all make these choices, and I think it's a little bit specious to try to call me out on my schedule without having actually checked with me what I was doing those days.
Well, so I'm not trying to push you too hard, Ryan, other than these are these are important groups. And so when we're talking about the SARM convention, you're talking about a couple days, hundreds of folks, Don Firk and hundreds of others that are there, agricultural producers of Saskatchewan, and it's just important for us to have those relationships as well. I mean, I identified the others. Just on climate justice, though, certainly I did respond to their submission. I'll follow up to make sure that they. Okay, well, that we'll make sure that they have it, because I sent it or prepared it a while back, and certainly it should be there. I also met with those young people, and they're brilliant. And I'm sure we can both agree on that. You know, I met with them a while back, and these are young leaders for today and tomorrow. And it's meeting with many leaders like this, folks across rural Saskatchewan and young climate justice leaders in Saskatoon. That's going to allow us to succeed as we move forward. So I don't have I guess my point would be: do you see, though, as running to serve as the leader and the premier, the importance of having a relationship with some of these groups as well? I know we have SUMA this week that's coming around. I'm sure we'll all be there. These are the urban municipalities. Do you see as well that it's important to have those relationships, say, with the rural municipalities?
Oh, absolutely. And albeit SUMA, I know you and I have a debate in front of the Regina Chamber of Commerce. We've got one, I think we've confirmed with the Saskatoon Chamber of Commerce doing one of their lunches. Of course, we have to have those conversations, and that's exactly what's been going on. And I also see us as a team, and right now we're having to push at each other, but I know at the end of the day, we will be a team, and we cannot all be everywhere at all times. And one of the things I'd really like to work on with our team, because we've got a great set of MLAs, is helping to make sure that we do a better job of spreading out the work so that we really are everywhere, instead of bunching and having 7 or 8 of us at one event and missing some of the other opportunities.
Thank you. This next question was submitted by the Leader Post. What does the party have to do to increase membership sales? Oh, I'm sorry, and we will have Ryan up first this time, please. Yes.
Excellent. Well, I think we've been at it. For one thing, we're now at 12,800 when we were 7,500 last summer, and that was during a federal leadership race. So even after there was a big membership push, we've grown it by another 5,000, and a few thousand of those, we're well over 2,000 directly, and many, many hundreds more indirectly that are in support of our campaign. So some of the things we've been doing, how did we do that? We reached out to all kinds of different communities. Some of the social movements that we've talked about, people who have been fired up, like Stop the Cuts, who wanted to engage, but also lots of different ethnic communities, people who hadn't necessarily been involved before, and we were able to make relationships. And the thing that has been really striking in our campaign is young people. We've had so many young people just show up out of the blue to our office on 20th Street in Saskatoon and say, I want to volunteer, I want to get a membership. And that's been really exciting to me, because that's obviously we need to continue to bring in new folks, new generation all the time. What is more of a concern to me, because I think we've actually shown that in a leadership race we can get lots of members, and we did this last time too. We were up around 11, 12,000, and then down to 5,000 within a couple of years. And why is that? I think we need to be figuring out, how do we engage people between elections, between leadership races, and how do we make sure that the promise, because we're talking about exciting things in this leadership race, that we don't on March 4th go back to our old habits of just being critical of the Sask party, and that we continue to be proposing new ideas, continue to inspire people, and give them an opportunity to be meaningfully involved in designing what that looks like.
And Trent, your chance to respond.
It's a really important question, and it has been an incredibly exciting period of time. And it's been so rewarding and encouraging to see Saskatchewan people not just saying that they're with us, not just saying that they're looking for change, but willing to take out that membership. More than that, to get active and to sell others to their friends and family and to community members. So it really has been a special period of time. I wish that the period where the cutoff came on the 19th, I wish we had weeks beyond that, because it had seemed that we had really created something where it was just the activity across the province. I know for our campaign, and I think Ryan had good activity on this front as well, but was really something. And young people And folks from all different cultures, all different backgrounds, people in different lines of work that had gotten active, firefighters through teachers, through those in the building trades. So many people within within our province. So this is important for us to build upon as we move forward. And I'm really hopeful on this front. I know I've got contacts, and Orion will as well. And very soon after this leadership race, we unite the effort. And we bring together to build the progressive force that we need to. And then we have contested nominations across Saskatchewan. And I know the conditions are ripe to sell memberships, to engage people, and to bring them within the party and to take on active leadership roles within the party. So I'm really encouraged by it. It's hard work and it's reaching out, but it's really rewarding as well.
Trent, you are up first this time. The next question is from the Leader Post. What will you do to encourage population growth from immigration?
This is very important. I think that we need to have, here we are in Treaty 6 territory, the homeland of the Métis, and we're a province that's been built upon that foundation with wave upon wave of immigration. This is very important to our province. So we need to support immigration, and we need to support those that are building their lives within in our province. At the same time, we need to do very meaningful work around reconciliation, around closing the gap economically and educationally for Indigenous people within our province. But for me, immigration is something I value, and it needs to be fair as well. It's not fair right now when the rules were changed in the SINP program, where those that were trying to have their family come and join them here were no longer able to do so. So I would commit to rebuilding the family class within the SINP program. I believe it's a matter of fairness, but I also believe my family came here from Scotland in 1903. And I don't know that the family would have stayed and been involved in the wheat board and the wheat pool and farmed for all those years had the whole family not been able to come in and to settle, because it's a matter of supports. And I've heard from so many people from all around the world that have chosen to build and better Saskatchewan by building their lives here, who have had that deal not honored to them. And I believe it threatens our ability to retain some of those families and people who have chosen to build their lives here in Saskatchewan as well. So it's a very important matter of fairness, and it's about ensuring strength for our future.
And Ryan, your turn.
Had similar conversations with people from the Sudanese community, Pakistani community, the Sikh community in Regina, who are saying that they have family members that want to come. They want to come, they want to bring their parents over to help raise their kids so that they can work and be out in the workforce. They have a cousin or a friend who's good at this kind of work, and there are opportunities, but because the family class is gone, they aren't available to. The way that family class got changed, that was a federal decision, because some people were using it incorrectly. So we need to change our rules and design a new way of doing it. But for the last 6 years, the government has just sat on its hand and said, well, that's fine, we just won't do it anymore. We need to actually be doing the work, being innovative, and saying, let's figure out a way that brings people who want to stay and allows them to do so. I also think we need to be really thoughtful about the temporary foreign worker program. We have a lot of people who come here for a short period of time, don't have a path to citizenship, so they're not going to stay. They're not going to build up those supports around them, and they are occupying positions that might be available for other people in the province. And I am not saying ever that we should avoid immigration, but I think we should be really careful with that temporary foreign worker program, because that's not a great opportunity really for those visiting folks, and it poses real threats to local people in Saskatchewan who should be able to access those entry-level jobs. Lastly, it's 10 seconds, so I will not say lastly. Thank you very much.
And we see a candidate card from Trent. Please go ahead.
Important comments around the temporary foreign worker program, and you just mentioned at the end that entry-level jobs. If you look actually at the utilization of that program, it's not just entry-level positions as well. So we really do need to have good, solid immigration with high integrity to it, but we really do need to make sure we don't utilize a program like the temporary foreign worker program at the detriment of Saskatchewan workers, and it does leave many of those that are also coming to fulfill those roles in a environment that they can really be exploited as well, and they don't have fairness around them. So I just thought those were important comments, and I just wanted to highlight as well that it's not just the entry-level jobs.
Ryan, your candidate card as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, and you're absolutely right, and that's where there's more of a discussion to be had. Really, there's a major concern, especially when you look at the level of poverty that exists in this province, and in particular among Indigenous people in the province and the lack of opportunities for employment. We need to make sure that there are positions and training, and that companies who are operating here actually put in the effort to make sure that they are hiring from First Nations and Métis communities primarily prior to going to something like a temporary foreign worker program, and that's something I think we really need to emphasize. The other piece is to make sure that when people come, they have the supports more than just a job. Often it's, you show up, you've got a job, you must be fine. But a lot more goes into being able to settle well. Access to childcare we've discussed a lot, access to supports learning English if English isn't your first language, making sure that you have housing that is close enough to the work, or that there's transportation. All these things that wrap around somebody being successful. We really need to be thoughtful with that community as well as everyone else in the province. How do we make sure they've got everything they need to succeed?
We are now going to take a halftime break. It will be a 10-minute break, and we will come back at the second half of the debate with questions submitted from you, the audience. We're done with your candidate cards. As mentioned, we invited you, the audience, to submit questions for the candidates. Thanks to everyone who submitted questions, and we will now provide them. Question 1 will be Ryan first, then Trent. Do you support the current 2-for-1 private MRI service currently available in Saskatchewan?
Well, I'm glad we're getting into the member questions. This is exciting, and I do not support that model. Any evidence that private, for-profit, user pay access improves wait lists or access is well, there isn't any. We've looked. For about a decade, I was on the board of Canadian Doctors for Medicare, which is an organization of docs across the country with our tagline of values-driven, evidence-based. So we've got that value that you should be able to see someone based on your need, not your ability to pay, but we also make sure that we're looking at the evidence. What makes a difference in making high-quality, accessible, affordable care? And everywhere that it's been introduced, whether it was cataract surgeries or MRIs or CTs, when you introduce that parallel private system, you don't shorten the wait times in the public system, you lengthen them. Alberta has the most private care and the longest wait times to get a CT or an MRI because two things happen. One, people start ordering more of them, thinking, oh, they're easily accessible, but also people start drifting from the public system and working in the private system or working in both of them, and so there's less services or less service providers actually able to provide the care. So I absolutely don't think that's a good idea. Also, it results in queue jumping. So if I need a MRI for a surgery and you need an MRI for a surgery and I can pay for mine, well then I'll get my surgery first, even though I won't pay for the surgery. So it's completely unethical and unfair. I think it's a bad idea and I certainly wouldn't continue it.
Trent.
Ditto. It's, I mean, this really isn't the way for our, for us to go. It's to fragment, to piecemeal our system, prevents it from being as effective as it can be. It actually prevents it, as Ryan has highlighted, from even being as efficient or as fair as it can be. So, no, this isn't the way to go. And I think, again, it's important for us to recognize what's at stake in this next election. What's at stake in public health care and Medicare within our province. Folks, we need to win. The fact we have a government now that's taken full control of healthcare within our province, consolidated that within the Premier's office, puts it at great risk by stroke of a pen to have massive privatization pushed throughout that system. And of course, there's all the other concerns with that measure around losing local voice. But the ability for the system to be privatized by stroke of a pen by a government that we know, has been unwilling or has been willing in the past to break sacred promises to the people of the province is a great risk. And of course, we also need to stop the nonsense where we see the private international consortia being gifted our infrastructure projects and shutting out Saskatchewan companies by way of the P3s. Of course, they cost us more. We lose control here locally. We see this happening in education. We see it in healthcare. We see it with the bypass. It's not the way to go. It's shutting out Saskatchewan companies and workers in the process, and it costs us far more in the long run.
I'll remind both candidates to watch their time. Next question. What does your strategy look like to defeat Scott Moe in the next general election? Trent?
Well, it requires many of you to be out there saying no Moe cuts, no Moe sell-offs. It requires us working together. It requires us to turn the dial in the weeks and months following this leadership and to come together as a progressive force, to reach out to this province that we love, to speak to Saskatchewan people earnestly and honestly, and to lay forward a vision that excites the people of this province, to be bold in our commitments, and to build out a plan with the people of this province that connects with their realities and challenges. So it's going to be reaching out relentlessly as a team, an incredible team. Of course, I've got an incredible colleague sitting here with me here tonight. We have an incredible group that's in that legislature. And we're going to draw on all those strengths to go out and reach out to our province. And we need to as well hold this government to account. We need to be tough. We need to be willing to expose the wrongdoing and to be relentless in making sure we get accountability for the people of the province. But of course, we need to be so much more than that. We need to, as I say, be engaging with Saskatchewan people in an honest and earnest way, laying forward a vision that excites the people of this province from the south to the north and points in between, and working together to win that next election so that we can deliver a province that works for everyone.
Ryan?
We can beat Scott Moe. I think he's very beatable because he's coming in with the same approach as Brad Wall, an approach that people are tired of. People are looking for change, and yet he doesn't have the charisma or the ability to communicate that Brad Wall did. He's not the same quantity. So I think we have a great opportunity here where people are looking for change and they haven't been provided with something that they're going to be super satisfied with. And it is very important that we do the work to point out the flaws, but pointing out the flaws is not enough. People, and I heard this loud and clear, as we traveled around the province this summer, people said to us, we know what you don't like. We know you'll stop the cuts. We know you'll save the crowns. What are you fighting for? What are you going to achieve? If we're not able to articulate a clear vision, a consistent vision of the kind of a healthy Saskatchewan we want to build, then we won't be able to win. We have to be putting that vision forward. And then we have to take the next steps. From that vision, what are the pieces that actually work to organize? How do we make the party more successful in local organization? How do we build our reach on social media? How do we take those 12,800 members and make them feel like they don't want to just vote on March 3rd and walk away, but that they see themselves as the workers, the volunteers, the candidates that will take us forward? That work is underway. People are inspired, people are excited. If we keep them going, if we keep them inspired with a new vision, we can beat Scott Moe. We can form the next government.
What is your view on the state of arts and arts education in our province? How will you ensure that support for the arts and arts education growing? Ryan?
Great question. Just last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, we put out an arts and culture policy we consulted with artists around the province and talked about what are some of the things we need for that profession to be successful, because it's been shown very clearly that for every dollar we put into arts, it comes back as $2 to $3 in our economy. And more important than that, that's how we tell our stories. That's how we teach children to actually enjoy the fullness of life. You know, this is part of what makes our experience rich. It's part of our health is also having that artistic expression. So what do? Some very obvious things, and we've talked about a lot, is restoring the film tax credit. So we've got that industry back. Continue to work with artists, whether that's musicians, dancers, sculptors, to be able to export their work around the world so that people around the world are seeing what Saskatchewan can do, but also work with rural communities and those artists, including people like Coulter Wall. Let's get them all around the province in small towns, not just exported. So how do we do that so the people of Saskatchewan can enjoy the talents that are emerging from here, but also that people are getting that opportunity, especially early on in their career, to be exposed, to have those 10,000 hours of deliberate practice and performance and really be successful. We have an incredible amount of talent in the province, and if we invest in arts and culture, it's good for all of us.
Trent.
This is a place where we can really lead and work with Saskatchewan people to deliver in a meaningful way. And arts and culture throughout our province enriches communities, brings people together, creates places and points of pride within our province, and of course contributes economically, socially, culturally. What's really damaging right now to arts education, which I think was the question, are two things. One are certainly the cuts, the underfunding in our classrooms, the underfunding in our post-secondary institutions, but then the cuts that have been foisted upon them. But that's not just it. This is a government as well that has very much narrowed the view of what education is all about. And when I talk about building the most enriched and engaging classrooms possible, I'm talking about the whole child. I'm talking about a holistic view of what education needs to be. And the arts are critical within that. So it's about proper funding, and then it's about empowering teachers. It's about supporting arts educators throughout our schools across Saskatchewan. It's about supporting extracurricular programs, and then it's about having a strong arts policy. And I'm fully committed to rebuilding a film industry in Saskatchewan, reintroducing the film tax credit, and also improving that system. And I've met with so many through this industry for a long period of time, and this is something we can accomplish. We can create investment, we can create jobs, and it's a point of pride for our province.
We have seen people lose positions to privatization as companies are brought in to provide services in hospitals, jails, courthouses, and government buildings. What would be your approach for protecting civil servants from further privatization? I'm concerned Scott Moe has indicated cutting 1,100 jobs to maintain the government timeline to balance the budget. Trent.
So for one, immediately following the election of our leader, because we can't wait until the next election on this front, we need to be an active, strong, vigilant voice on this front. We can't let Scott Moe and the Sask party go and give pink slips to 1,100 public servants across our province. We need to work all we can to give pink slips, in fact, to him and his group of MLAs in the next election. When I talk about the push to a low-wage, part-time, precarious work, privatized, outsourced economy, this is it. And you see it within your community. You've seen it through laundry services. Of course, we've saw it with food services within corrections. We see it with our infrastructure within our province. And it makes no sense to be sending the big checks to places in Alberta, places in the United Kingdom, companies in France, when we have people here within Saskatchewan who deserve those good, solid, mortgage-paying jobs. We're eroding communities. We're hurting our economy when we're privatizing these jobs, and we're losing the fiscal capacity, of our public service as well. And at the end of the day, when you see a government that's, outsourcing project after project, whether in the ministries or the crowns, it's eroding the capacity within our province and costing us more and limiting us to respond to the big challenges and opportunities ahead of us.
Ryan.
We saw them get rid of the contract or get rid of the workers who clean the legislative building. The people who work right alongside those MLAs, they were willing to just push them out and replace them. And it's part of this. I'm going to tell you a story a little bit, telling tales out of school. We got a questionnaire from one of the organizations in the province saying people in the public service make 20% more on average than people in the private sector. Would you even that out? And or would you want to see that evened out? And the answer is yes. I'd like to see you pay 20% more to people. They're trying to tell us that we should pay people less, trying to tell us this lie that good jobs are bad for our economy. That's not right. The more people we have who have well-paying jobs, the better everyone does, including small businesses. They succeed more when people have money to spend. And we look back at our history. This is what Tommy Douglas said. When you start to see them go after laundry, when you start to see them go after food services, that's the thin edge of the wedge for privatization of the whole system. Let's go the other way. Let's commit to keeping people on staff, and let's commit to the government of Saskatchewan being a living wage employer, so that nobody that works for the government or no one that we procure contracted services through is not making enough to live above the poverty line.
Being poor in rural Saskatchewan means more than just not having enough. It means having to travel far to access services. Many people in rural areas face barriers to entering the workforce, lack of educational opportunities, and little access to health care. How will you address these problems to help people in this situation thrive? Ryan.
In Saskatchewan, I think I alluded to this earlier, that we have about 100,000 plus people living in poverty. And that is resulting in us losing $3.8 billion a year. 5% of our GDP is lost because of the increased health, social services, and justice costs, and the decreased economic activity associated with that poverty. A couple of years ago, I was asked by the government to join a group that was giving advice and recommendations on what a poverty reduction strategy would look like. And we came up with a strategy that would have reduced poverty by 50% within 5 years. And that looked at income security, looked at food security, looked at education, and definitely we took a very clear look at what's happening in rural Saskatchewan. What are the differences in terms of fewer employment opportunities, in terms of challenges in transit, in terms of challenges accessing things like childcare, so that you're able to work when you have very few facilities available. We need, unfortunately, we gave those recommendations to the government, and like they tend to do with expert recommendations, they put them on a shelf and did nothing. So we continue to be the only province, BC's building theirs, the only province in a few months without a poverty reduction strategy. And everywhere that's put one into place has seen great reduction in the number of people living in poverty, great improvements in the health outcomes of their province. We need to commit now to a proper poverty reduction strategy that takes into account the specific circumstances of people living in smaller towns and farms, and in particular in remote communities and on reserve.
Trent.
So 25% of children in Saskatchewan are living in poverty. Just get your mind around that. 1 in 4 children in Saskatchewan are living in poverty. That manifests itself in so many ways, limits the futures of those young people, is a direct barrier to learning within the classroom. And we know as well that that's an experience that's shared by many adults and many throughout rural Saskatchewan. We have to act on this front. I'm glad the question highlighted the rural component, because there's an added isolation at times that comes with that piece, particularly when you start to deal with things like our transportation system being eliminated, something that so many counted on within our province. So we need to build back a public transportation system. We need to make sure we have proper income assistance programs. We need to stop the attack on the Assured Income Disability program, for example. We need to make sure there's proper allocation of resources for all on social assistance, boosting those dollars. We need to make sure that those that are receiving assistance have a much higher threshold of dollars they can earn from an employment perspective before those dollars are clawed back. And we need to deliver in a meaningful way around universal $15 a day childcare, as I've proposed. Somebody on the margins, in fact, wouldn't be paying that amount anyways. They'd be protected within it. So we need to go out and have that conversation. We need legislation, we need action, and we need it based on human rights.
With cuts to education, school boards have to make tough decisions. They've hit services for children with autism, programming for food security, speech and language programming, to programs for children with violent behavior. What priorities would you ensure funding for to make sure we can meet the needs of today's children? Trent.
So there's little that motivates me more than education. I'm a teacher. My partner, my wife Stephanie's a teacher in Regina as well. I grew up in the house of a lifelong teacher. I believe education is the foundation to our future, and it's directly being attacked right now. We're holding back a whole generation of young people from being able to live up to their full potential, and that holds us back as a province. So we need to act on this front. We need to win that next election to do so. And then we need to put the dollars back in place, put our money where our mouths are, and make sure that our classrooms have the support that they need. We need to give back control to school boards who have had control taken away from them over the budget, on the budget side of the equation, and we need to put the investments in place from early learning all the way through. The stories of programs that have been lost and the impacts on children with intensive needs across this province are heartbreaking. Speech and language pathologists, we have some here tonight, being eliminated. Special programs for students with intensive needs and autism being eliminated. Classrooms getting larger and larger with supports being pulled away. This fails all students. Teachers who have had their autonomy attacked by this government. We need to have the resources there and also empower our teachers to have the autonomy they deserve to respond to the needs of their learners and their communities. So it's about resources and it's about local control.
Ryan.
There's no wiser investment and there's no more important foundation of good health and a good future than accessible quality education. And yet for the last decade, we've seen a government that has declared war on school boards and on teachers, has treated them with disrespect, has made decisions without any consultation. We need to change that. We need to start the foundation of this next part of our history has to be reestablishing a relationship where we have teachers, school boards, government, communities, parents at the table together saying what kind of a system do we want, and they design it together. Without that, with things coming in from the top down, we'll never get anywhere. Absolutely agree with Trent on returning autonomy. We were in Kenniston the other day, and I think Trent's visited the same place. Amazing model of personalized learning, really cool innovation in the classroom, incredible distance learning center that they built. They said if we did that with Bill 63, we wouldn't be allowed to. We just wouldn't have the opportunity. At the heart of making that education system a quality education system is equity. When the kids who struggle the most do well, whether they're kids with special needs, kids from a marginalized background, kids who are English as an additional language, when they do well, everyone else does well. The more equitable the system, the better. Let's start with things like a school lunch program so that no kid is going to school hungry. Let's design the kind of system that works for all of us.
This is our very last question for the night, and we're going to begin with Trent and then move to Ryan for the last question. And we'll have closing statements following that. Thank you. So, Trent, what can the province do to help reduce the over-representation of Indigenous peoples in our justice and prison systems?
This is such an important question, and it speaks to responding in a way that's different than we have for a long period of time. There's been some good efforts over the years, but clearly the effort to have proper reconciliation, full reconciliation within our province just hasn't been where it needs to be. And this is actually something I come at based out of my experience. I worked with a lot of young people who came out of the correction system. I actually had the chance to work with Premier Calvert's government, who put in a very brilliant ways a little bit of funding in place to support those young people coming out of custody, because the door was revolving for those young people. 91% of them returning to custody within 3 months, a recidivism rate that limited their ability to certainly access education. Often there was harm in the process to them or to community, and and certainly the cost of our correction system, is just really expensive. $100,000 to lock up a child. I would much prefer putting those kind of dollars in a meaningful preventative way within our communities. So I've laid forward a reconciliation framework to be established directly with Indigenous leaders across Saskatchewan and grassroots to respond to social and economic challenges that we face. And then we also need to act on poverty. We need to make sure that we're providing the opportunity and the enrichments in the classroom that we need to, and we need to fight against the racism, to be frank, that exists within this province, the injustice that so many face, and we all play a role on that front.
Ryan.
It's very clear that the tough on crime approach has not worked. The longer you lock people up, the more you lock them up, the more likely they are to reoffend, the less likely they are to have a good life in the long run. What would be much nicer to see is if we were smart on crime, if we were investing at the right time. Prevention programs. I was at Straight Up yesterday. I don't know if people have heard of Straight Up. It's a program that works with gang members and helps them to leave the gangs, but also is in the schools all the time, talking to students about how to stay away from that kind of a life. And it's very clear that that's the kind of work we need to do, and we need to change our approach to corrections as well. When people are in the system, we need to stop looking at them as good or bad people. They're either healthy or they're sick. We need to see it as a place, not that you're there to just do your time, but you're there to get better, that there are supports within that system, so you're actually rehabilitating. And we're focusing on the competencies, what people need to learn, not just doing their time. When it comes to addressing racism and the big gaps that continue to exist, that has to be a primary purpose. And one of the things I would do is follow the model from Australia, where they have an annual Closing the Gap report that comes out and shows how far they've been able to get in closing the gap in health, economic, and education outcomes between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. And then the Prime Minister gets up and gives an annual speech elevating that to the primary social activity, political activity of that time. I would implement a very similar model here, make that the very top priority of my government, and deliver that Closing the Gap speech every year and close the gap.
We will now move on to closing statements. For closing statements, we will hear from Ryan first, followed by Trent. Ryan, please go ahead with your final 2 minutes.
Thanks very much, and thank you, everybody. Thanks, Trent. It's always, we've done a lot of these, but I really like doing them. I feel like I learn something more every time. And we are telling that new story. And I started tonight talking about the story that we're writing. And then I heard from you. I heard about real reconciliation. I heard about climate change leadership, about wanting to keep Medicare public, about wanting people to have good jobs and recognizing that that's good for all of us, about rebuilding STC, about addressing poverty. These are the ingredients for that story that I'm talking about. A story that reflects the core belief of our movement, that we all do better when we remember that we're all in this together. That's what I'm talking about. And it's what we need to be talking about. People don't need to hear what we're fighting against. They want to know what we're fighting for. They want to know what our vision is. That's the way we move beyond the status quo. That's the way we move beyond more of the same. That's the way we move beyond opposition. And it's the only way we win, when our values are on full display. Because the truth is that our values are Saskatchewan values. And we need to trust in the people of Saskatchewan enough to say what we truly believe and what we know that we can achieve. And if we do so, if we trust them, they'll trust in us. Tonight, I'm asking you to be part of something big. We've had hundreds of volunteers come forth, sold many hundreds more new memberships. People have come inspired by a bold new vision. I'm asking you to join me, to join us. Let's get to work. Let's write that best news story together. Let's bring our strongest argument, our best ideas, and let's win with the bold vision of the kind of province of which we could be even more proud. Are you ready to write that story? All right, let's get it done. Thanks so much. Have a great evening.
Now, Trent, your final 2 minutes.
Well, thank you so much to everyone that's here tonight. I always value and enjoy the time in Prince Albert and the engagement here tonight. Thank you, Ryan, for your questions, your engagement here again tonight. Thank you, Tara, and I'm glad you made it through tonight without getting over to delivery. New Democrats, our province is at a crossroads. The things that we value and that give us strength are being threatened and dismantled. Our crowns, our classrooms, supports for people in the very most vulnerable. It's time for us to rise up. It's time for us to fight back. It's time for us, as we've done in our past, to lay forward a vision of meaningful change and punch well above our weight. And that change matters. I'm ready together with you to build a province that works for everyone, one filled with hope, opportunity, and reconciliation. A vision that includes universal mental health and addiction services, $15 a day universal childcare, building the most enriched and engaging classrooms possible, going well beyond stopping the cuts, locking down our crown corporations with the highest level of protection possible, and then expanding them to serve the needs of today and future generations, acting meaningfully on reconciliation, addressing poverty, acting on climate change, not just fighting for, but delivering a $15 minimum wage, and building a strong and inclusive economy that works for all people and all of our province. You know, it wasn't long ago that we came out of a very difficult election. We're sort of on our knees. But we've risen up, we've reached out, we've built. We're at a special point, and we've built momentum. We've won 2 by-elections, added great members in the process, but our work isn't done, and it's together that we're going to finish the job. So my commitment to you is to work tirelessly, to have my sleeves rolled up, along with our incredible team, to reach out, build, to defeat the Sask Party, to build a province that works for everyone. Let's get the job done.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. That concludes our debate. Please join me in giving a big round of applause for our candidates.